Hello and welcome to the part 2 of AWS Security Services Selection or Decision Guide. So this lecture will contain remaining two topics, which are primary security mechanism, primary use cases and key differentiators, and finally key concepts for the certification exam, common exam confusion points and comparisons, and some important limitations and scope to remember. And same set of 26 services. So primary security mechanism, primary use cases and key differentiators, the first set of parameters. And first we have AWS artifact. So primary security mechanism is secure document retrieval portal. And primary use cases are downloading AWS compliance reports, accepting AWS agreements, which can be BAA, and some key differentiators are it provides AWS compliance documents, not customer evidence, which is provided by audit manager. And here's some of abbreviations are BAA is business associate addendum. Next we have AWS audit manager. Primary security mechanism is automated evidence collection, framework mapping, workflow management. Primary use cases are continuous compliance monitoring, audit preparation and risk assessment. Key differentiators are it focuses on collecting and organizing evidence for audits, and this is versus other services which are AWS config, which provides the state, or it manages the state, and this provides the audit. Second, we have a comparison with CloudTrail, which takes care of the raw logs. Next, we have AWS Certificate Manager, ACM. Primary security mechanism is certificate lifecycle management that includes issuance, renewal, and deployment. And it provides secure key storage. Primary use cases are securing web traffic like TLS SSL for AWS services, and internal PKI along with private certificate authority. Key differentiators are managed public certificates, free and auto-renewed, versus private CA, which is you build your own private CA certificate authority, and this is it is easier than manual. So if you certificate manager, you can just use as it is because it's a managed service. You don't have to build anything by yourself, and all those your certificate management becomes very easy. So PKI is public key infrastructure. Next, we have AWS Cloud HSM. Primary security mechanism is dedicated hardware cryptography, and there is a standard called FIPS 142 L3. And second primary security key mechanism is customer key control. Primary use cases are high compliance key storage, offloading SSL TLS, public key infrastructure, and digital signatures. Some key differentiators are it's a dedicated hardware. There is a customer control versus if you go for KMS, key management service, you have managed service versus shared. So this is not shared and that is shared. Second comparison is with payment cryptography service. So that is very highly specialized. So FIPS is Federal Information Processing Standards and HSM is Hardware Security Module. Next we have AWS CloudTrail. Security mechanism is API call logging and event recording. Primary use cases are security analysis, compliance auditing, operational troubleshooting, and change tracking. Key differentiators are it records actions like who, what, and when. When compared with AWS config, which is basically managing the resource state, it just keeps track of the AWS resource state. Next, we have Amazon Cognito. Primary security mechanism is authentication through OIDC, SAML, Federation, and user directory. And authorization, first is authentication, this one is authorization, and that includes OAuth 2 and AWS credentials. Use cases are customer identity and access management, CIAM, for web and mobile applications, secure API access, and temporary AWS access. Key differentiators are for application end users versus IAM or Identity Center, which is for workforce. Next, comparison key differentiators is with differentiating with user pools. So user pools are authentication versus, this is within the service, there are two components, user pools, which is authentication, versus identity pools, which is authorization. And OIDC stands for OpenID Connect. SAML is security assertion markup language. CIAM is customer identity and access management. And OAuth 2 stands for Open Authorization 2.0. Next, we have AWS config. Primary security mechanism is resource configuration recording, rule-based compliance evaluation. And primary use cases are change management, continuous compliance monitoring, security posture analysis. Some key differentiators are it tracks resource configuration state and history versus another service, CloudTrail, which tracks only the API calls. And second, it provides compliance checks compared versus Audit Manager, which provides the evidence. Next, we have AWS Control Tower. Primary security mechanism is service orchestration, policy enforcement through guardrails, and account provisioning. Primary use cases are establishing secure multi-account landing zones, centralized governance, and compliance baselines. Key differentiators are prescriptive framework versus building custom governance. For example, organizations plus others. And it simplifies setup, but it's less flexible. Next, we have Amazon Detective. So, primary security mechanism is log analysis through machine learning and graph theory. Relationship visualization. Primary use cases are security incident investigation, root cause analysis, threat hunting, visualization. Key differentiators are it focuses on investigation/visualization when compared to guard duty, which is for detection, or when compared to security hub, which is for aggregation. Next, we have AWS Firewall Manager. Primary security mechanism is centralized policy management and deployment. Primary use cases are consistent firewall policy enforcement across organization, and that includes web application firewall, shield, and security groups, which is also a kind of firewall. And one more use case is compliance. Key differentiators are it manages other firewall services centrally, and these are which I just talked about: WAF, shield, security groups, and etc. versus the firewall service themselves. So you can directly manage or you can centrally manage. So directly manages again WAF and network firewall security groups, or you can come here and manage them. Amazon Guard Duty. Primary security mechanism is threat detection through machine learning, anomaly detection, and threat intelligence. Log analysis. Use cases are detecting compromises, malware, unusual activity in your network, in S3, in EKS, RDS, or runtime environments. Key differentiators are it detects active threats when compared to another service, AWS Inspector, which provides potential vulnerabilities, and one more service compared to Macy, which is for sensitive data exposure. Next, AWS Identity and Access Management. Primary security mechanism is it provides authentication and authorization through policy evaluation. Primary use cases are controlling access to all AWS resources, defining user and defining role permissions, and it allows federation. Key differentiators are it is a foundational service for AWS resources, for AWS resource access when compared to, let's say, AWS Cognito, which is for application user, or when compared to Identity Center, which is for workforce SSO. So this is important. Identity Center is when you want to have organization-wide single sign-on. That time you will go for Identity Center. But if there is no SSO required, this is inbuilt. This is the foundational service. You will be using it without even knowing it. And you can go for Cognito when you have some resource access which you provides for application users or mobile apps. So that is very specific use case. Next, AWS IAM Identity Center. Primary security mechanism is single sign-on federation through SAML and OIDC. Centralized permission set management. Primary use cases are centralized workforce access to AWS accounts and applications. Integration with external identity providers, IDPs. Key differentiators are it manages workforce single sign-on when compared to, let's say, IAM users, which is direct credentials, versus one more service, AWS Cognitive, which is for customer identity. Uses permission sets which are mapped to IAM roles. So this is how it works. There's a permission sets feature in this which gets mapped to IAM roles. Okay, next service, Amazon Inspector. Primary security mechanism is vulnerability scanning through CVEs and network reachability and SBOM analysis. Primary use cases are identifying software vulnerabilities within operating systems, packages and Lambda code, and network exposure. Key differentiators are it finds potential weaknesses, vulnerabilities, when compared to something like guard duty, which is for active threats. And there is a continuous versus classic scheduled. There are two options. And CVE stands for common vulnerabilities and exposures, and SBOM stands for software bill of materials. Next, AWS Key Management Service, KMS. Primary security mechanism is secure key generation and storage, which is backed by HSM, and encryption and decryption of APIs and access control. Primary use cases are encrypting data at rest and data at transit, protecting secrets, digital signatures, and data keys. Key differentiators are managed key service versus cloud HSM, which is for dedicated HSM, versus secrets manager, which is for managing secrets, and that also uses KMS. HSM is hardware security module. Next, Amazon Macy. Primary security mechanism is sensitive data discovery through machine learning and pattern matching. S3 security assessment. Primary use cases are identifying and classifying sensitive data like PII, which is personally identifiable information, and financial information within S3. And second is compliance for GDPR and HIPAA. GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation, and HIPAA stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Key differentiators are it focuses on data content in S3, let's say when compared with something like guard duty, which is for threats, or inspector, which is for vulnerabilities. Next, Amazon Network Firewall. Primary security mechanism is stateful/stateless packet filtering and IPS, intrusion prevention system. So there are two types of system, IDS and IPS. So in this case, IPS, Surikata, intrusion prevention system, and intrusion detection system is for IDS. And protocol inspection. Use cases are VPC network segmentation, filtering internet traffic, blocking malicious traffic through IPS. And differentiators are Layer 3, Layer 4 and Layer 7 network filtering for VPC versus, so when compared with Web Application Firewall, WAF, which is only for Layer 7 web application, versus one more service or one more feature of EC2 security groups, which is for instance Layer 4 stateful protocol only, or let's say something like network access control list, which is at the subnet level, which is for Layer 4 stateless. Security groups is Layer 4 stateful. Next, AWS organizations. Primary security mechanism is account grouping through organizational units, policy inheritance through service control policies, and central billing. And primary use cases are multi-account management, centralized governance and compliance, and cost allocations. Key differentiators are manages account and organization policies versus IAM, that is manages users. So compared with IAM, which is for managing users, roles, permission within accounts. And service control policies are the guardrails. Next, we have AWS payment cryptography. Primary security mechanism is secure cryptographic operations, and this is also backed by HSM, and it is PCI compliant, which is payment card industry standard. Or then payment specific algorithms. Primary use cases are securing payment applications, PIN management, card data validation and generation, TR31 key exchange. Key differentiators are specialized for payment industry versus general purpose KMS or cloud HSM. So PIN is personal identification number, and this TR31 is ANSI X9 143 interoperable secure key exchange key block specification. So it's very specific protocol or format specific to this payment cryptography. Next, we have AWS private CA. Primary security mechanism is private certificate authority hierarchy management and private certificate issuance and revocation. Primary use cases are internal PKI, securing internal services, IoT device authentication, and code signing. Key differentiators are it creates private CAs versus AWS certificate manager, which manages public certification certificates or uses private CA for private certificates. And key differentiators is it allows full internal PKI control. Next, we have AWS Resource Access Manager. Primary security mechanism is resource-based policy management for sharing. Primary use cases are sharing subnets, transit gateways, Route 53 rules, license manager configurations across AWS accounts. Key differentiators are it manages resource sharing via resource policies versus identity and access management, IAM for cross-account roles, which are identity-based. And this simplifies sharing for supported types. Next, we have AWS Secrets Manager. Primary security mechanism is secure secret storage, which are KMS encrypted, secret rotation, and access control. Use cases are storing database credentials and API keys, automating credential rotation, and replacing hard-coded secrets. Key differentiators are it manages secrets lifecycle management, especially rotation, when compared versus KMS, key management service, which is only for keys. Or when compared to, this is very popular question, compared to parameter store, which is for simpler configuration and often cheaper, but it does not have a rotation. So parameter store can also be utilized, but it's simpler and there is no rotation feature which is inbuilt. Next, AWS Security Hub. Primary security mechanism is finding aggregation, security standard checks, and prioritization and automation. Primary use cases are centralized security posture monitoring, compliance reporting, and finding and doing triage or remediation. Key differentiators are aggregates / contextualizes findings versus services generating them, and those services are GuardDuty, Inspector, and Macy, and provides compliance checks. Next, Amazon Security Lake. Primary security mechanism is log centralization, normalization through OCSF, which is Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, then data lake storage, which is in S3. Primary use cases are centralized log storage and retention, security analytics on the normalized data, and compliance logs. Key differentiators are centralizes and normalizes raw logs versus security hubs, which is for findings, or when versus one more service, CloudTrail, which is for API logs. AWS Shield. Primary security mechanism is DDoS mitigation, distributed denial of service mitigation at layer 3, layer 4 through scrubbing, and layer 7 through web application firewall advanced mode. Next, we have threat detection, primary security mechanism, and DRT, which is for DDoS response team. Use cases are protecting application and infrastructure from DDoS attacks. Key differentiators are specialized DDoS protection versus web application WAF, which is only for web exploits. versus one more service, network firewall, which is only for network filtering. And there are two options within Shield. One is standard, just free, and advanced, which is paid, and that comes with a lot of features. Next, AWS Web Application Firewall. Primary security mechanism is L7 request filtering, and that is through rules. Then we have managed and custom rule sets. We have captcha and challenge. Primary use cases are protecting web apps against SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and bots. Filtering geo and IP data, and rate limiting. Key differentiators are it protects web apps at L7, layer 7 versus Shield, which is for DDoS protection, versus network firewall, which is for VPC network, and versus two more components, which is security group and network access control list, which is for L4, layer 4 EC2 instance level or at the subnet level. Next set of parameters are key concepts for certification, some common exam confusion points and comparisons, and some important limitations and scope to remember. So for first service is AWS Artifact. Key concepts are accessing compliance reports, which can be SOC or ISO, and accepting agreements through BAA, Business Associate Addendum. The confusion can be with Artifact, which is for AWS compliance, versus Audit Manager, which is customer compliance evidence. Limitation, it only provides AWS reports, does not assess customer environment. Next, AWS Audit Manager. Key concepts are assessments, frameworks, which can be standard or customs, and controls, evidence collection and reporting. Confusion can be between Audit Manager, which is for evidence workflow, versus versus AWS config, which is for state and rules, versus CloudTrail, which is for API logs. Limitations, it relies on data from other services and regional scope for assessments. Next, AWS Certificate Manager. Key concepts are public versus private certificates and validation through DNS, email, and HTTP. And some more service integration, like key concepts are service integration, auto renewal, and regional versus global CloudFront scope. And the main part is confusion. So ACM, we have managed certificates for AWS services versus private CA service, which is building your own CA hierarchy. Limitations, cannot use directly on EC2 or on-prem. Public cert, private key not exportable. Next, AWS Cloud HSM. Key concepts are dedicated HSM, FIPS 142L3, and customer control, users and keys. We have HA cluster, backup restore, and SDKs also available. Confusion can be between Cloud HSM, which is customer managed HSM hardware, versus KMS, which is AWS managed key service, versus secrets manager. Limitations, high management overhead, cost, complexity, and it requires VPC. Next service is AWS CloudTrail. Key concepts are event types, which can be management event, data events, insights, and network events. And then we have trails, which can be single region or multi-region, can also be organization-wide. Log delivery can be S3, or can be CloudWatch logs, or can be Amazon Event Bridge. Then we have integrity validation. Then common exam confusion points are CloudTrail, which is for API activity, which basically means who did what, versus AWS config, which is for resource state management, or when compared with VPC flow logs versus guard duty. Some limitations are data events are high volume / cost, and they are off by default, so we have to switch on, and approximately 15 minutes of delivery latency is there. Next service, Amazon Cognito. Key concepts are user pools, which is for authentication, identity pools, which is for authorization. We have JWTs, which is JSON Web Token, application clients, hosted UI, and triggers. And some exam confusion points are Cognito, which is for customer identity access management, CIAM, versus IAM or / identity center, which is basically for workforce IAM or SSO. And within this, some exam question will try to confuse you on user pools versus identity pools. Some limitations are it's a regional service and it requires complex configuration options. Next, we have AWS config. Key concepts are configuration items, recorder, delivery channel, and rules which can be managed or custom, conformance packs, aggregators, and remediations. Exam confusion points can be AWS config, which is for resource state and compliance, versus CloudTrail, which is for API actions, versus audit manager, and versus systems manager, which is for configuration management. Then, our configuration system manager is basically configuration as code. Then, important limitations are rule evaluation frequency limits and depends on accurate resource discovery. AWS control tower. Key concepts are landing zone guardrails through SCPs and config rules. Then we have account factory, organizational units, shared accounts, and a dashboard. Exam confusion points can be control tower, which is for prescriptive landing zone, versus AWS organizations plus any kind of custom setup, which is more flexible but complex. Some limitations are it's opinionated and it's less flexible, and there are some differences with if you are using GovCloud. Amazon Detective. Key concepts are behavior graph, data sources which can be CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, guard duty, and Elastic Kubernetes services logs. Finding groups, visualization, and scope item. Exam confusion points can be Detective, which is this service for investigation and visualization, versus guard duty, which is for detection, versus security hub, which is totally for aggregation, versus security lake, which is mostly for S3 data. And limitations are it's a regional service primarily for investigation after a finding, and it relies on input data sources. AWS firewall manager. Key concepts are centralized policy management, and that includes web application firewall, shield advanced, security groups, network firewall, DNS firewall, organization integration, and compliance reporting. Confusion can be between firewall manager, which is like a policy orchestrator, versus the individual file services which it manages, which is all the other one: WAF, shield advanced, security group, network firewall, DNS firewall. Limitations: it requires organizations and config. There are some cloud limitations and does not replace the need to understand individual firewall services. Amazon Guard Duty. Key concepts are threat detection through ML, anomalies, and intel. Data sources, findings, optional protections for S3, malware, EKS, etc. and suppression rules. Confusion can be between Guard Duty, which is this service Guard Duty, versus Inspector, which is vulnerability assessment, and versus Macy, which is for data discovery, versus Security Hub, which is for aggregation. Then limitations: it's a regional service. Detection is probabilistic, relies on enabled data sources. Next, AWS IAM. Key concepts are users, groups, roles, policies, and that can be identity policy or resource policies. Permission boundaries, service control policy, attribute based access control, ABAC, MFA, multi-factor authentication, STS, security token service, and assume role. Exam confusion points are users versus roles, identity versus resource policies, and permission boundary versus service control policies. And limitations are global changes have wide impact, policy evaluation logic complexity. Next, AWS IAM Identity Center. Key concepts are workforce single sign-on, identity sources which can be external or internal, permission sets, account assignments, app assignments, access portal, and organization integration. Confusion can be between IAM Identity Center, which is for workforce SSO, versus Cognito, which is for customer identity and access management, CIAM, versus IAM roles and federation. A limitation: this instance is regional and it relies on underlying IAM roles. Next, Amazon Inspector. Key concepts are vulnerability scanning for EC2, Elastic Container Registry, ECR, and Lambda, scan types, findings, which can be CVs and scores, continuous scanning V2, and there is agent versus agentless. So this is V2. So this is there is a newer version of this service V2. And some confusion can be inspector, which is this service, which is mostly for vulnerabilities, versus guard duty, which is for threats. Then inspector V2 versus inspector classic. Limitation are some supported operating systems and languages, and it relies on the SSM agent for some EC2 scanning for this V2 service. So SSM agent is from Systems Manager service. And CVs is, as I talked about, is common vulnerabilities and exposures. AWS Key Management Service, KMS, key concepts are CMK, which is Customer Master Key, versus AWS Managed, versus AWS Own Keys. And then we have symmetric versus asymmetric keys, key policies, grants, aliases, rotation, envelope encryption, import key, and multi-region keys. Exam confusion can be KMS, which is for key management, versus Cloud HSM, which is dedicated hardware security module, versus secrets manager versus parameters store, which is mostly for secrets. And limitations, it's a regional service unless we have multi-region keys. Then there are some request quotas and there are key policy size limits. Next, Amazon Macy. Key concepts are sensitive data discovery, and that have managed identifiers or custom identifiers, S3 security posture, findings, jobs versus automated discoveries, and allow list. Exam confusion points can be Macy, which is basically for data content in S3 versus guard duty, which is for threats, versus inspector, which is for vulnerabilities. Limitations, regional, only scans S3, and performance depends on the object size or the object type. Next, we have AWS Network Firewall. Key concepts are stateful and stateless rules. IPS, Intrusion Protection System, Suricata. So this is another vendor, and their IPS is part of network firewall. And VPC deployment model, routing, firewall policies, and rule groups. Exam confusion points can be network firewall, which is at network, VPC network layer 3, layer 4, layer 7, versus WAF, which is at layer 7, versus Shield, which is for DDoS, and security groups versus network access control list. Limitations, regional, it requires careful route table management, and there is a cost per endpoint hour plus how much storage is processed. Then AWS organizations, key concepts are OUs, SCPs versus IAM policies, then consolidated billing, service integration like resource access manager, control tower, etc., and delegated administration. Confusions can be SCPs, there is a max permission guardrails. So SCP basically is a guardrail, and there's how much maximum is allowed, versus IAM policies, which is grant permissions. And organizations, we have account management versus IAM, which is identity management within a single account. Limitations, SCPs do not affect management account. SCPs affect only, the management account is basically the root account, and SCPs affect only principals, not service linked roles by default. AWS payment cryptography. So key concepts are PCI compliance focus, payment specific crypto operations like PINs, which is personal identifiable number, CVVs. So CVV is card verification value, ARQCS, which is authorization request cryptogram, and key management TR31. This is a specific format or specification. Then confusion is between payment cryptography, which is payment specific, versus KMS/Cloud HSM, which is general purpose cryptography. Limitations, highly specialized use case and a regional service. AWS Private Certificate Authority. Key concepts are private CA certificate authority hierarchies. So it includes root and subordinate. Certificate templates, CRL, which is customer revocation list, and OCSP, which is online certificate status protocol. Integration with certificate manager. Confusion points are private CA, which is built internal PKI, versus ACM, which is managed public certificates plus uses it that can also use private CA. Limitation, regional service, there is a cost per every certificate authority that you create per month per how many certificate you have issued. AWS Resource Access Manager. So key concepts are resource quotas, principles that includes accounts, organizational units and IAM, managed permissions and cross-account sharing model. Exam confusion can be resource access manager, which is resource based sharing versus IAM roles, which is identity-based cross-account access. Limitations: only supports specific resource types for sharing. Some types cannot be shared with IAM principles. Next, AWS Secrets Manager. Key concepts are secret storage, automatic rotation via Lambda, KMS encryption, resource policies, and APIs or SDK retrieval. Exam confusion points can be Secrets Manager, which is for secret lifecycle management and rotation, versus KMS, which is only for key management and parameter store, which is simpler configuration and secrets. Limitations: regional service and rotation Lambda incurs separate cost, and API call cost are there. Next, we have AWS Security Hub. Key concepts are finding aggregation, security standards like CIS, which is Center for Internet Security, PCI, which is Payment Card Industry, and FSBP, which is for AWS Foundational Security Best Practices. And some more key concepts are controls, security score, insights, automation rules, custom actions. Confusion can be Security Hub, which is aggregation or aggregator / compliance view versus guard duty, Inspector Macy, which is finding sources, and versus a detective, which is for investigation, versus config, which is for rules engine. Limitation: it's a regional service and requires aggregation for multi-region view. Relies on config rules for many controls. Next, Amazon Security Lake. Key concepts are centralized log storage, which is in S3, OCSF normalization, which is Open Cyber Security Schema Framework, data lake concepts, sources like AWS, third party or custom, and subscribers. Confusion can be Security Lake, which is central raw log storage and normalization, versus Security Hub, which is for finding aggregation, versus CloudTrail, which is for API logs, versus CloudWatch logs. Limitations: regional storage, cost based on ingestion, normalization, storage and query. AWS Shield. Key concepts are DDoS protection at layer 3, layer 4 and layer 7. Then there are two more: standard versus advanced, WAF integration, DRT support, DDoS response team, which is part of advanced mode, and cost protection, which is also part of advanced mode. Confusion can be Shield, which is mostly on DDoS, distributed denial of service focus, versus WAF, which is specifically for web application, web exploits, versus network firewall, which is general network filtering. And just to know the differences, you should know what is under standard or advanced. Limitations: standard is automatic, free but limited. Advanced requires subscription and configuration. Then AWS Web Application Firewall. Key concepts are Web ACS, access control list. Then rules, there are two types: managed and custom. Rule actions can be allow, block, count, capture or challenge. Then WCUs, which is Web ACL capacity unit, logging, integration with CloudFront, application load balancer, etc. Confusion can be WAF, which is only web app layer 7, versus Shield, which is DDoS, versus network firewall, which is for VPC network, versus security groups, versus network access control list. So these are all last two are layer 4. And limitations: so global CloudFront for regional, so global only for CloudFront, or regional for elastic load balancer, application load balancer. And this requires rule tuning. You need to tune the rules, and WCUs. So basically that's how they calculate the cost. And that's all. Thanks for watching.